Hello, I'm Jackie Lucky, your financial planning maestro. This series of podcasts is aimed at financial planning professionals and also those who are looking to enter the financial planning profession. We will be talking during the podcast about all things Certified Financial Planner certification related, talking to other CFPs around the world, and also we will be dropping in on some new entrants who've just entered the financial planning profession, and we'll be checking up along the way on a regular basis with them to see how they're getting on. I hope you enjoy today's podcast. Hello and welcome. I'm Jackie Lucky, your financial planning maestro. And in today's podcast, I am joined by a very special person who's been working really hard and has recently passed their Certified Financial Planner certification. And that is Sian Davies Cole from Planworks. Hello, Sian.
Hi, Jackie.
Thanks for joining me today.
That's all right. You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
We're going to talk everything related to your Certified Financial Planner assessment journey. And also then we're going to move on and talk about women in financial planning and get some views from you on all of those sorts of issues that's impacting our profession at the moment. So I'm going to start at the very beginning, if I may, and ask you, how did you get into financial planning? Are you one of the many people I seem to come across who kind of fell into it? Was it by accident or by design?
Oh, yeah, one of those. Definitely by accident, and maybe a little bit by design. So initially, I started working in a high street bank. It was kind of a gap year, but as a mature student. So I didn't go straight in at 17 or 18 or anything. So worked in high street bank, got some advice along the way that doing a diploma might be a good idea, as that was kind of just coming in. So this was around RDR time. Mm-hmm. I was in front of clients at that point. So, opening bank accounts. I then moved on to looking after a bank of clients who were kind of a bit higher net worth, but not advising them on a regulated side. So I was getting that kind of feel whether I wanted to be client facing or not. And that's when I'd heard this, there was a paraplanning role come up. So moved into that within the bank still. And that's kind of how I ended up in paraplanning, but also in real financial planning as well. It was really interesting time as well, sort of going through the change in pre-RDR and post-RDR, and seeing that kind of change to the profession and the wider kind of banking and financial planning profession as well.
Yeah. And what was it about paraplanning? Because you are a career paraplanner, aren't you? And what was it about paraplanning that attracted you to switch over to that role?
At that point in time, it was, I'd done quite a lot of client-facing time, and that was very, very salesy. Before RDR came in, with financial planning and with banking, there was very, very much a focus on money targets and bonuses because of those targets. Lots of things changed around that time. But there was a lot of pressure on that, and I was good at selling. I brought in the results, but I really just did not enjoy that pressure of having to be successful because I had done something that day that meant some money value or getting some sort of bonus, and that didn't really drive me. So that's the bit I really didn't like. And if you wanted to get away from that within the banking part, then it was definitely going into kind of one of the more back office kind of roles. But I knew that I liked the technical stuff, and I found that I could say quite easily, or I enjoyed talking to my clients about going in, taking advice or looking at investing. All I would do is make an introduction then to an IFA. I wouldn't actually, sell them or recommend any investments, but I was quite good at explaining that whole concept and getting them in front of an advisor when they needed to. Yeah. So I kind of was listening to the skills that I'd got and the things that I enjoyed. But yeah, that kind of drove me down the route of going into a paraplanning role. And I realized that I could really add value when working with someone that actually really loved being in front of clients and selling to them. they enjoyed that bit, which I didn't enjoy so much, whereas I could enjoy all the technical stuff, which freed them up to enjoy their bit. So it worked really well.
And I think, it's certainly one of the things I experienced as a paraplanner myself is that there are lots of paraplanners out there, you included, I think, who have that skill of being able to explain complicated things in plain English to clients. And I think, there are many advisors out there who think that their paraplanner is just a kind of, geeky number crunching. Yeah. That's the kind of joke that they always used to be levied in my department when I was doing paraplanning. But actually, paraplanners are so much more than that, aren't they?
They can be. I mean, some of them are just techie geeks and, don't want to be anywhere near a client. And I get that. But I think there are a lot of paraplanners who are quite happy being involved in the advice, quite happy being in front of a client, but usually alongside the financial planner as well. And I've been in those roles as well. And the financial planner gets so much out of it as well, because they know that I'm there waiting to chip in and say, oh, but I've got this funny technical question that I need to ask, but how do I ask it? And I can sort of get my way around to ask that question, or I can explain something particularly complicated in a easier way, with the financial planner being there to kind of make it even simpler if they need to as well.
Yeah. I think, I always used to be relied on as a paraplanner. So, the advisor and planner that I used to work with, they would kind of go, if they were asked a question in a client meeting, they would go, oh, Jackie. And you go, yep. And just kind of dive straight on in, don't you? Sometimes it's got to be done.
But I also think it's like it really added so much to me as a paraplanner and understanding kind of more financial planning stuff. Actually being with clients and hearing those, real life situations. I don't, it's really difficult to understand how to interpret things and deal with things that you see as a paraplanner in black and white on a file note without understanding, well, why a client might have said that, or why A and B doesn't equal C as a recommendation. Well, it might do, but the client might need this, or they might have said this, or they might have, turned up to that meeting and been visibly nervous when you talked about something. And, reading those kind of signals or understanding the reasons why things might not look like they should look is a really interesting thing that definitely altered the way that I think about financial planning and looking at cases when I'm looking at them in black and white on file notes and things.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I guess that there came a point in your professional career where you thought actually, working at the bank as a paraplanner wasn't for you.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm quite glad to say I think that the salesy kind of way that financial planners sometimes work, it's becoming not necessarily less so that now in the profession, but there's definitely an opportunity for people who feel like me to go on and still be really successful financial planners, because there's definitely been a recognition with kind of that move away from really hard sales environments not suiting everybody. So I think there's much more opportunity now to be successful in that, even if you feel a bit like me. But yes, I did. I got chartered, and this was back in, I'm trying to think, 2014-ish, 2015-ish. And in the bank, there was not much for me at that point. A move into compliance was suggested, and I wasn't really feeling that. And at that point, I was in kind of post-advice review. So after each bit of advice was done, our team would review that advice to make sure that it was okay, to see whether any remedial action was needed or anything else. And I was in a team that was checking those, but also then coaching those checkers to on a technical basis, or to see whether their checking was suitable as well. So that's where I first had my experience of combining like building my skills with talking to people, coaching people, as well as the technical point as well. So yeah, so I didn't really know where else to go, but I knew that there wasn't going to be much option within the bank for me. So I started looking elsewhere, and chartered paraplanners seemed to be an option out there. There seemed to be quite a call for them. So went on my journey going into financial planning firms where they're in a chartered paraplanner role, which was a blinking eye opener. and I learned an awful lot by doing that. But also there was a high expectation, because I was chartered, that I would come in with all of this knowledge and all of this experience, whereas in a bank you get very shielded from real financial planning and advice. You get to understand what restricted and independent advice really looks like when you've had those different experiences.
Yeah. So what sort of things did surprised you going into independent firms?
Well, I had no idea what a GIA was at that point. So that was quite a funny one, because, I've got administrators in my team talking to me about a GIA, and I thought, what is a GIA? I can't ask that question because that seems really obvious. But understanding just the basics of how things work. So, what is a custodian? What is a DFM? How do these different things work? Who are the different people involved in different parts of the process? Because you definitely didn't see any of that when you were in a bank. And then also just learning that firms have kind of pretty free rein to do financial planning as they want to do it. So, in one firm, it looks very different from another. As long as they, follow the either general guidance that the FCA says or the specific rules that they have. There's quite a lot of freedom to do what you want to do in that, which was, really, really interesting to me. Vulnerable clients was one of those sort of turning points where, in the bank was a very strict rule about who was treated as a vulnerable client and what the kind of how you could advise them, which was very restrictive. Whereas in a financial planning firm, it was very much a practical look of, okay, well, what does that look like? How are they connected? How is this going to impact any advice that's given or the person that's in front of us if it's not them? So it's a much more practical way to look at things. And I found that was much more where I wanted to go then in my career of having kind of full reign to be able to advise clients on whatever was suitable. So independence was really important to me and still is.
Yeah. So at what point did you find out about the certified financial planner certification, being qualified as you were? When did that come across your horizon?
I'd say it first probably came across my horizon when I joined a firm where the financial planner I was working with was a CFP. I had no idea what it was by that point, but we spent a lot of time working together. The clients that we were working with were the kind of clients and the kind of situations that I really thrived on, really complex clients, lots of tax planning opportunities, estate planning, all of the really juicy stuff that I really still love getting involved in. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of realized, okay, so that's kind of what, not necessarily what it means to be a CFP, but it certainly ties together those skills of understanding how to plan with clients with that technical knowledge as well. So that's when it first came across my horizon. Did I think about it too much after that? Not too much, only kind of thinking about it later than when I came into to join Nathan at Planworks 2.5 years ago. Again, realizing that I'm working with a number of different firms and different planners, but the ones that I really love working with are CFP. And that is, again, because they are working with these really nice, lovely, complex cases, high net worth clients with loads of tax planning kind of stuff with it. And that's definitely my bag. So at that point, I started thinking, okay, right. So is the universe telling me something? These are the people that I really love working with, that kind of do things that I would want to be doing if I was a client-facing financial planner. But even working on it as a paraplanner, it's still a lot of interest to me. So. Yeah. So it wasn't it didn't go unnoticed. I just thought, okay, right, there's this thing, and they're talking to me about it, as anyone who's done CFP will endlessly talk about CFP because it's such an experience.
Yes.
So they're kind of telling me what's involved in it and giving me various warnings. But yeah, it definitely came across my horizon at that point again in a much more focused kind of way, and I can fully blame. The person that I set up the Paraplanner Club mentoring program with, Chloe, for talking me into doing CFP, because she knows I like a challenge, and it was and this was I think at the fair beginning when NextGen started offering a bit of support around doing the exam and doing the actual CFP case study, and I was already a member of NextGen and thought, well, if I don't do it now, am I ever going to do it in the future? So I just thought, let's just do it. And jumped in.
And so did you sit the level 6 exam?
I did. And I will tell anybody that listens, it's the best financial planning exam that I've ever done. I really actually enjoyed it.
Wow.
The study for it was, I don't know, it didn't feel like it was too much, because I think if you're going into it with lots of experience and lots of knowledge and real life good financial planning experience of doing kind of things like discounted gift trusts and trust planning work and tax planning work, if you're doing that regularly, then a lot of this is kind of just putting it all together and cementing it and formalizing it really. So it was good.
Excellent. And then after you got those results, did you go straight into the level 7 case study?
No,
or did you have
no way.
Pause?
Yeah.
Lie down in a dark room over Christmas or something.
Well, that was it. It was at that point. It was like, do I want to study and do the case study over Christmas, or do I want a little break? And, realizing that from what I've been told, there was no good time to ever go into this. It was going to be a bit of a crash course in how to drop everything in your life. So I thought, just give myself a little break. Let's start in the new year after Christmas and just tackle it then. I went for the next intake after the one that was straight after my exam.
Excellent. Yeah. So your intake was the February, wasn't it? Last year, I think it was, wasn't it? 2022. And so you were blasting past the end of the tax year whilst working on your case study then too.
Yeah, good idea, bad idea. I mean, I have no idea. I think it is what everybody kind of said to me is, there will be no good time, and that's absolutely it. You're either doing it over Christmas, you're doing it over tax year end, you're doing it over the summer. There's no kind of good way to look at this. And probably what I wasn't maybe prepared for is that obviously there comes potentially a resubmission, and then that's out of kilter. You can't plan for that at all, really.
No.
So
yeah. So tell us a bit about your experience of the level 7 case study assessment. How did you get on? What was your approach to it?
So my initial thought was, as soon as it came out, I didn't. My plan was not to stick my head in the sand at any point, because I had done that at some points during my chartered study, and for example, the investment bit. That's the bit that I don't enjoy so much as the whole planning thing. So I definitely stuck my head in the sand with that and just kind of went, I just hope it's all right. So I thought, with this, I'm not doing that. I'm going to hit it head on and look at my case study as soon as it comes out. Start making some notes, get a feel for this client and their situation, and start making my kind of thoughts about what I think we need to do, what my recommendations might be, what the gaps might be, before I then get stuck into the number crunching part of things. So that's exactly what I did. I had a good look at it, started making those notes. Signed up to your fast track course because I knew that I was going to need to force myself, because being a business owner as well as someone who really just loves their job, I knew I was going to need to have to force myself to take time out of doing that to focus on this. So I knew that would do that with a point that, at least if it got me to a point where I kind of had got some of the numbers together, it gave me a really good starting point. It was forcing me to take time out of work to do it anyway, and it set me on a really good track. So that was my initial look at it. But actually looking at the case study itself, the situation, it definitely wasn't the kind of case that would horrify me. It's the kind of case that I would see normally in the kind of work that I do, and that I would enjoy. Not that I would say I enjoyed doing the case study, but the kind of case it was
get your teeth into.
Yeah, it was. It didn't horrify me. It was kind of like, oh, this is quite interesting. That was it. So I just kind of decided to throw everything at my first submission and getting on track with the case study, rather than waiting till the end, waiting until a few weeks passed. That's why I started with the fast track course, and then just not kind of putting it down for any length of time between then and handing it in was my key kind of strategy. And I think probably what helped me get through that, but maybe it didn't, I don't know, is no expectation of passing on the first time. And that took the pressure off a little bit. And, I think anybody that's looked at doing the level 7 knows that the pass mark for first attempt is not that high.
No.
So that for me was a good expectation to have, because I knew, that if I wasn't successful in that first one, then I was going to have to put that time aside and let me kind of plan my life, knowing that was going to have to be a potential thing that I'll have to come back to.
Yeah. And because you get 3 submissions, don't you? So as long as you get through by the end of the 3rd submission, you keep the same case study. So you're essentially just tweaking your first submission, if you like, aren't you then?
Exactly. And that's why, again, I thought if I just throw everything at the first attempt, then I might be, and I won't use the word lucky, because is definitely not down to luck. But I might get it in the first attempt. And if I don't, then I'll know that I haven't got so much work to do because I didn't put the effort in. I did put as much in as I possibly could. So that helped me to do that. But luckily for me, I got it second time, and that was probably maybe a bit more stressful, because you're thinking then, if I don't get it this time, the next time is the last time.
Yes.
and then the pressure is super on. So I didn't want it to be that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's key that you threw everything that you could at it for the first submission.
Totally.
Because then, even though it feels a bit stressful, imagine if you had basically wasted that first submission, as some people do. Life takes over to such an extent that they barely put in anything. And then when you get to the second submission, it's basically your first submission.
Yes.
So then, then I think you put yourself into so much more pressure, don't you, as each submission goes by. But luckily for you put in all of that effort. Well, again, not luckily, but you
forcing
did
myself to do
effort.
it.
Yeah,
and actually, I think probably the other exams that happen in our profession, for me, influenced the way that I tackled that as well, because I've had probably the luxury of experiencing all 3 now of the professional bodies that do exams. So I did my diploma and chartered through what is now the LIBF. Did some exams then with the CII as well, and now moving over to CISI. But actually, most people in our profession are doing CII exams, and very much it's about cramming for one exam at one set date, whether that be a multiple choice or, an essay style written exam. Whereas my experience was definitely not that, because in LIBF, it's more about continuously kind of doing assessments as you go along. Some of them are for actual, to be marked, and some of them are just a way of learning. So you can't just go, I'll just book my exam and cram the week before, because that's not how those kind of that study works. You need to do coursework through, during your time and submit it as well. So you can't just ignore it. So I think that set me up really well, because I really didn't like CII assessments. They didn't work for me because of the cramming and never knowing whether it's really going in or not, and just putting it on that one exam on that one day. It just didn't work for me, which is one of the reasons I chose to go down the sort of LIBF route in the initial instance anyway.
Yeah. And everybody learns differently, don't they? But I think with the CFP, with the case study for the level 7 component, certainly what I tell people is that I think, from my point of view, that it's more of an application of the knowledge that you've got through that case study, isn't it? And that kind of giant 3D jigsaw puzzle that I'm sure you're sick of me talking about. Is that what your experience was too?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I think it's probably the only assessment I've done. The level 6 exam probably was a little bit as well. But yeah, it's the only kind of real thing that assesses your application. And it assesses your application over the whole load of financial planning. It's not just talking about investment or pensions or whatever. It's all of it all together. And obviously purposely giving you a case that interacts with all of those different elements, and that you can't fully meet the desired outcome in the best way just with one thing. You have to compromise in some way. It's a perfect assessment, because you have to understand what impacts what, and what compromise you would be willing to recommend as a financial planner, even though knowing that it takes away from another part of their objective that they want to meet as well. It's a great way to assess people. And like anybody that's gone through it, it's the best assessment. It's like the gold platinum standard of financial planning of assessing, I think. So the level 6 exam definitely gives you a good feel for going into it as well, because it's so well rounded, which is quite nice. You can't just go in thinking, well, I know investments inside out, because that's not going to cut it. It needs to be more fully rounded than that.
Yeah, excellent. And how many hours do you think roughly it took you to get through that level 7 case study assessment?
Well, I actually worked it out.
No need to say roughly then, Charlotte.
In preparation. Well, it still is rough, because you don't note down every minute that you're spending on it. But, a lot of time, that is definitely the case. So doing your course, that was 4 days. I then noted down that I did 4 days, 6 days off work. So, if I was employed, that would be holiday. I then did 2 full weekends, and then 2 full weeks of evenings. So coming back to it after work at 7 o'clock, working through to midnight for those 2 full weeks.
Gosh.
Yeah, so that's 150 hours. So I thought, is that a realistic number? Yeah, it probably is. And luckily for me, because I do have my own business, and I have a little bit of a team with me as well, I could take some time off. It wasn't easy to do that, and I still had to do work around it, like working after I'd spent the whole day on your course. So I then have to go and do some more work as well.
But yeah,
it'd be really difficult if you're employed, and you've got other life commitments, kids, pets, looking after elderly relatives, things like that. It's really difficult to do it.
And that's where you need to plan your time out and be realistic, because 150 hours, I've interviewed other people on this podcast who've said it's taken them closer to 200 hours, which is, it's a massive but serious commitment, isn't it?
Oh, totally. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if, I had spent more than that on it. But if you think about like that amount of time, it's not like, because when you look at kind of the other exams that are out there, not that they're at the same level, but the number of hours that you'd need to study for them, they aren't quoted as anything too much different. But the fact is, here you've got a very strict deadline. You can't just go, I'll just put that exam back, or I'll sign up for it then, and that gives me less time. It's like, no, you get it that date, and you need to do it by that date, and you've only got 150 hours to cram into those dates in between, which is not a lot. But somebody did show me that there's a really nifty counter on Microsoft that so you can have a look up afterwards to see how many minutes you spent editing your documents.
Wow.
So I did actually have a look at those, and it doesn't. For me, I had the Word document and I had the Excel document. So I spent 1,553 minutes editing my Word document. So that was my actual submission. So that's 26 hours. And then I spent 6,355 minutes editing my spreadsheet, which is 106 hours.
Wow.
and neither of those account for my final submission that I had to then redo. I didn't have to spend too much extra time on that resubmission, luckily. But yeah, so I think that comes out about right.
Yeah, that's whopping, and lovely to hear that you loved your spreadsheet so much to spend 1,000 hours on it.
Loved it, yeah, loved it, Jackie, loved it.
Yes. So would you, looking back now that I know, I was talking to somebody the other day who's still in the middle of putting in their second submission, and I said to them, has it changed you as a paraplanner and a financial planner? And they went, I said, are you still feeling the pain? And they went, no, I'm still feeling the pain. So if I ask you that same question, looking back on it now you've kind of been through the pain of it all and come out the other side and had a little bit of time, how do you feel looking back? Has it changed you at all? Does it make you look at things differently for real clients? What do you think?
A little bit, I would say. I think I'm going to put myself in in a nice position. I think it came along for me at the right time. I didn't enter into it too early in my kind of experience or career. So I'd already got quite a lot of really rounded experience, but it just strengthened, I think, the skills that I've got, as well as the experience and knowledge that I've got. It's just getting me to a better place. Probably my confidence is what it's improved no end, I would say. It's a real achievement getting CFP. That's kind of what is what I would say. But anybody else I know that's got it as well says exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
And for me, it was nice confirmation in terms of when I did my first submission. I didn't come back with a pass that first time, but actually it wasn't my advice that was being questioned. My recommendations were all solid, and I was just over the moon at that. I couldn't have been more happy that although I was going to have to resubmit and pay again and take it more another 6 months than I'd wanted to get the result. Actually, my advice was solid, so that was great. That was perfect for me. And probably the thing I learned most, and the thing that I now take forward more into working with clients, is about assumptions and also about state benefits. Those are the two areas that I looked into a lot more doing CFP case study than I'd probably ever really looked at before. Mm-hmm. You don't, as an experienced paraplanner, you don't ignore kind of those things. If you're told something, you don't kind of go, right, I'm taking that as gospel. I'm going to question it a little bit. But it's just realizing, well, you really need to question that an awful lot more. Yeah. And state benefits is probably one of those things because, until you do the case study, and depending on the case that you're looking at, depends, I guess, probably how much you actually look into these kinds of things. But it seemed to be quite a common strategy when thinking about whether you bring state benefits into financial planning, to just kind of make a very simple assumption that you go, I'm assuming that you will get no state benefits if something were to happen. And when you then do the case study, you realize actually state benefits are really quite a valuable thing to people when they need it. It's not saying that, it will, meet your lifestyle costs or anything like that, but it's, for somebody who really needs it, then it can make a massive difference. And you get to understand all of the impacts on different things. Like in mine, I had a maternity allowance to consider, and someone who didn't qualify for a full state pension, and then potentially would do if they qualified for one of the state benefits because they were disabled. It's an interesting thing to then go, right, now I understand even more of these interconnected things that happen in financial planning.
And I had a client once who had 4 children. And, at the point when I was doing paraplanning, we had already always taken the same tack to ignore state benefits. But of course, having 4 children, back going, must be 15 odd years ago now, the benefits you were looking at £500, £600 a month in benefits that we were just ignoring, which made a material difference to that client's financial plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a bit like, when you're doing regular financial planning, not even super complicated sort of plans or anything, just ignoring things like the marriage allowance, it can just make a massive difference. And it's just, they're what we could see as basic things, but they can easily get ignored if you don't know kind of what the rules are or the interactions between different client scenarios. It's interesting. It's definitely highlighted that a bit more for me than already I was looking at it.
Yeah. And you are one of many people who looks closer at assumptions now. So I think that's a great thing. Mind you, I think that's probably me rabbiting onto you about them so much.
I think that was probably one of the more painful bits for me of doing the case study, was not necessarily, writing up not necessarily researching or thinking about the assumptions. It was more around writing them up. I could have written, I think at one point, I think I did write about 10 pages of how I got to my assumptions. And obviously that wasn't going to cut it into the page limit. So what exactly to say around this when you do so much research? And then again, I think that's when it probably crosses over quite a lot into the paraplanning world, where we're used to kind of going, right, I'm going to write all of this massive document, and then I'm going to put that bit on the file, and I'm going to put that bit in front of the client. Whereas this was like, no, you can't do that. It's all going to the client. It's all going in the submission. So that was, it was quite a painful bit for me, I would say.
Yeah. But I think we learn from our natural style. And I think because when you've got the case study, you don't have that opportunity to interact with the client. It naturally makes us write more, I think, as well, which then automatically means that, we're up against the page limit because we end up wanting to kind of elaborate more than perhaps we normally would do, because normally you might, talk to the client about certain aspects, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just a sort of thing. Well, do I put that in there? Don't I put it in there? And then, I started off very much writing it kind of like, oh, I'll put that in and I'll take it out if the word count gets too much or the page count gets too much. But then obviously you don't kind of go, all right, I'm putting that in one place and I'll highlight it so I know I can just rip it out if I need to and it doesn't affect anything else. You then have to go and reread everything again to make sure it still makes sense, even if you take a bit out of it. So that was that's goes into why all of this takes quite a long time, because you want to throw everything at it, but also you're very mindful that I can't, because I can't write down everything and I shouldn't write down everything, just to try and get that passed, but also just being mindful of that page count was it was a tough thing.
Yeah. I think 60 pages, people say it kind of sounds a lot, doesn't it, to start with? But actually, because of the complexity of everything that you want to get in there and explain as fully as possible so the client would understand, you can get way past 60 pages, without turning around. I mean, how many pages did you do on your appendices? I think it was more than 20, wasn't it?
I'm pretty sure it was.
Like 25 pages or something.
I'm going to show it was up to about 25. I'm sure it was. Because you just have to allow plenty of room for those the cash flow forecast bits to go in, because even then you've got the question of like, well, as long as they can zoom in, then it's readable. But if they can't zoom in, then no, it's all completely illegible. So I'm just going to hope that they can zoom in, because I can read it from here. But let's see. And because if you failed just because they couldn't read the numbers and everything else was fine, you'd just be gutted.
Absolutely. I did have a client in that situation who was absolutely gutted, I can say, but did pass on their second submission when they sent in the spreadsheet slightly larger.
It's just annoying. Again, it goes into the whole thing of, you are producing something that is, it's not real. It's not how you would do it in real life, because you would never put all of those numbers in front of a client. But it's just understanding, right? Well, I've got to do it for this, so I've got to make sure that they can. The assessor can see how I've got to that number and make sense of the recommendations.
Yeah. And like you say, in real life, you've probably got parts that will be held on file and parts that you will present to a client. But this assessment is essentially those two bits together, isn't it, really?
Yeah, exactly. And in real life, you will know your client as to whether or not they need more information because they're that type of person, or whether they are the other end of the scale and absolutely trust you 100%. And as long as as a financial planner you're doing the right thing and you've saved it all on file, then that's absolutely fine. But you don't have that luxury here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So let's move away of talking about the CFP for a moment and talk about women in the financial planning profession. Mm-hmm. Now, when I started many moons ago, there weren't many women in the financial planning profession. What's your experience been like coming into the profession, and how have you been treated over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. There's definitely not enough women in financial planning. That's for sure. And my experience in it, it is. There's no getting away from it being a very male-dominated profession. That's how it is. I think for me, it definitely doesn't put me off. It would never put me off about going into any profession. The fact that there's a certain number of males, a certain number of females, or whatever. I'm quite relentless, and I think you have to be anyway, doing a CFP or, if you want to make change in something. Yeah. So that's kind of always been my tact is, if I don't like something that's happening, how can I adapt to change that? So just kind of building some energy in to kind of go, right, what do I want to tackle? How am I going to tackle it? And see if I can make some change where, more women do feel more welcome within our profession. And I think, what I talked about earlier with the kind of sales pressure, that seems to be quite a common theme across females in financial planning, whether they're financial planners or administrators or paraplanners. Yeah. It seems to really put lots of women off, and that could be the gender difference possibly, that we just feel more of that sales pressure and don't like it. But we are good at selling. We just don't need the pressure, and we don't like the pressure to maybe do it. But have I ever thought about going out of, moving to a different profession because of, the male domination within our profession? I don't think so. I can't think of a time when I did. I think it's more about understanding that the profession is really quite wide, and there are lots of different ends of the scale for different types of firms and how they are made up, how diverse they are, how they do things, and you get to see this quite a lot. And luckily now I get to see it even more so now with working with a number of different firms all the time. It's really quite interesting. But I think it's probably more of a general issue rather than specific to our profession as well.
Yeah.
So I've worked in other industries, and I can't say that the experience there was much different where there was a male domination, or anything else. So it's I don't think it's specific to ours. But for me, I know that I enjoy working with like that diverse group. So I would always seek out kind of a company or a profession to work in where there is a diverse group rather than just male or female dominated.
Yeah. And so, what would be your advice to people who are perhaps unhappy in the role that they're in, and maybe thinking, in some countries like South Africa, there's been quite a significant exodus from the financial planning profession in kind of mid-30s and early 40s, where many people have said, right, enough's enough. I'm out of here. I don't want the pressure anymore. Change the profession completely. If you came across people like that, or people like who are worried, are listening to us chattering away today, what would be your advice to them?
I would say financial planning is definitely a place for women here. They're welcome, they're wanted, and it's definitely about finding the place in the profession for you. So it might not, you might be a financial planner and that's not working for you anymore. So it's about looking at maybe other firms or different ways of working that might work, or looking at other roles within financial planning to see whether or not they might work in your current situation, or whether they work in the current climate. And that would be my advice. Is there's a lot of different options out there. It's about connecting with people that can help you and guide you to help make those decisions, or just open your eyes to what is out there. That can really help. And kind of, I'm not going to go on about it, but it touches a little bit on mentoring, which obviously I'm heavily involved in. But that's a really key part of understanding where a place can be for you. And we see a lot of people in the mentoring program that I co-founded, a lot of people coming into financial planning from other professions. So we see it the other way around as well, which is really interesting.
Which is good. Yeah. That's very positive,
amazing,
isn't it? Yeah. And, you're working so hard with the Paraplanner Club, doing all of this work. If you could, wave your magic wand and say in 5 years' time or 10 years' time, what would you want the Paraplanner Club to look like, and, the mentoring in particular to look like for you?
Oh, that's a really good question. And I think, we're doing plenty of good work there already, helping people to, make their own decisions, take control of their own professional decisions, which is what we really wanted to be there for. But what I really saw when we co-founded the Paraplanner Club was that it was majority females were the ones that were in firms, financial planning firms, administrators and paraplanners, just not being supported or coached into moving on, whether that be an administrator moving on into a paraplanner role, or a paraplanner being sought out as the next financial planner for the firm. It didn't seem to be happening. And it did, in my experience, it was very much, gender-based. A male would come in as an administrator and they would be worked through to a paraplanner and then a financial planner role quite quickly, whereas it just didn't happen in the female space. And there was just a real lack of support and infrastructure around supporting anybody to move on in a firm if that's what they wanted to do. So I think more of that for the Paraplanner Club. That's what we want to showcase. But also, I would really love to see that influence happening back into firms. I would love to see mentoring schemes happening in financial planning firms as standard practice. And then, actually, there wouldn't be a need for a separate mentoring scheme that is a Paraplanner Club. That would be my ideal.
Yeah. Wow, that's fantastic. Well, I look forward to watching the progress of you and Chloe and everybody else in the team who's putting all the hard work into that. So we are very nearly out of time actually now. I just wanted to bring it ask you one last question, bring it back to your CFP journey. And for all of those people out there who are who are thinking about doing the Certified Financial Planner certification, going through the exam and through the case study assessment, do you have any tips for anybody?
I sure do. So my number one is going to be about time. So I would say don't start your journey unless you're prepared to dedicate your life to it until you pass. Sounds extreme, but it takes more emotion and time than you believe you even have available to you. That's probably my top tip.
Wow.
It won't put certain people off. It wouldn't have put me off. But it's just knowing that fact, because we all have lives outside of our work and the things that we do, but it's just knowing that you might have to put a lot of that on hold while you're doing this. So it's going to take dedication. Probably the next tip is something that fits more into being a paraplanner than it does into a financial planner, maybe. But you're going to need to think about where you're going to actually do the majority of your work for your CFP case study. So what I mean by that is most paraplanners have a place set up where they have peace and quiet, they can focus, they're very used to sitting in front of two screens with a spreadsheet on one and a Word document on another and headphones on. That is how you're going to have to probably do your CFP case study. So it's knowing where that's going to fit in your life. If you don't really have an office at home and that's where you're going to be doing your CFP case study, it's not going to work if you're going to plan to sit around your dining room table and you've got a big family. It's just not going to happen. And then the last piece of advice I would say, and this would have served me very well, but I probably wouldn't have listened to it anyway, is stick to the examples that you get as a template, however much you don't agree with it.
Okay.
If I'd have done that the first time, I probably would have got a pass the first time. That's the way that I would look at it, because I didn't like how it was set out. I sort of said, right, I'm going to do it, how I think I should do it, and they didn't like it. They wanted it to make sense, which was according to the example. So that's what I went back then and did when my resubmission was just. Had a good look at the examples again and set it out more in the format that they'd presented it in, and hey presto, I got a pass.
Sian, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'm sure that our listeners are going to get so much benefit and encouragement with listening to your realistic views on how to pass the Certified Financial Planner. And good luck with the Paraplanner Club and the mentoring scheme.
Thanks, Jackie.
I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. It's really interesting, isn't it, to listen to other people's points of view about different things, all relating to our wonderful financial planning profession. If you know anyone who might be interested in listening to any of these podcasts, please pass on our details to them. So that's it from me. Join me again next time when we'll be talking all things Certified Financial Planner related, and also dropping in on our new entrants to the financial planning profession. Bye for now.